TFA fam, welcome in. We are on to week 12, which means we are also on to Thanksgiving week. Plenty of football to be had this week with Thursday and Friday, Sunday, Monday. So we're going to have a very healthy helping of football this week. So without further ado, let's get into the waivers this week. Good news is there are no bye weeks this week to deal with. So that is a positive. And we got through week 11 relatively healthy for the most part so far. Obviously, there's still one more game left to go. But so far, it looks like we're going to be in pretty good shape in that department as well. So I do expect this week to be a little bit lighter in terms of waiver ads. I don't right now. There's no you have to spend all the whole clip of your fab or waiver budget or anything like that on. I think this is more of a maintenance week. So that being said, let's get into it. So let's start with the quarterback position, and I think it starts off with for me this week is Gardner Minshew, and really he's widely available. Only rostered in 12% of leagues. Colts were on bye this past week, but they get a very favorable matchup this week. They face a Bucs defense that has been torched, allowing 285.3 passing yards and almost 2 touchdowns through the air per game, which has led them to allow the 6th most fantasy points per game. So I do really like Gardner Minshew. And then Matthew Stafford against Arizona this week. He is rostered in almost 45% of leagues. Stafford had a kind of a mediocre day today, completing 17 of 31 for 190 yards and a score for 15 fantasy points. We'll have to see if Cooper Kupp will miss any time after he left early in the first half, but the Rams will head to Arizona to take on a Cardinals defense that has allowed the 8th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. Stafford's been pretty mediocre for the most part this year. Like he just is kind of a guy that gets you like 15, 16 fantasy points. So I mean he's fine, but he certainly doesn't have much of an upside. Next up is Derek Carr or Jameis Winston for that matter. We'll have to see if Derek Carr will be ready to go this week due to the concussion and shoulder injury, but they do get a favorable matchup this week against the Colts, who have been a defense that has been had through the air, allowing the 13th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. We don't really have much of an update on Derek Carr if he's going to play. I know Dennis Allen was asked if they were going to make a change at quarterback. He didn't really sound too enthused on that question, so I don't know what's going to happen. But if Derek Carr doesn't play, Jameis Winston is definitely also in play as well. And then Baker Mayfield, rostered in 48% of leagues. He completed 29 of 45 passes for 221 yards in his score. It could have been a much, much better day had the Bucs offense not turned the ball over twice inside the red zone. But the Bucs do get a favorable matchup again this week. So I don't mind Derek Carr. And then lastly, Aiden O'Connell, they're going to take on Kansas City. I don't love it. The Kansas City defense has been fantastic this year, but they are going to be in a passing game script. They do still have Devontae Adams, Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers. So it's possible he could get there, and especially playing from behind him, get some garbage time. And then Mac Jones, I would love to have him higher. I don't even know if Mac Jones is going to be the starter at this point, with Bill Belichick not really wanting to commit. But they do get an incredible matchup against the Commanders this week. Commanders have just been absolutely torched through the air all season. I mean, hell, we saw old Tommy DeVito have himself a day for 3 passing touchdowns today for Tommy DeVito. I mean, that's how bad that passing defense is. I probably should have him higher on this list just because of the matchup, but I also don't really know if he's going to be the starter either. We'll see as they come out of the bye. But I think this is the kind of quarterback you're looking at for this week.
Kick it on over to the running backs for week 12. Obviously, the top of the list is going to be Zach Charbonnet. He's most likely owned in any competitive leagues, but if for some reason he's sitting out there in a 10-team league or something, he needs to be added. We saw Kenneth Walker go out with an oblique injury. He will likely be out for week 12, especially considering that they are on the Thursday night matchup this week. We saw this is kind of why we've been talking about for the past several weeks, when we haven't had the major injuries in terms of these being the weeks where you want to add guys like, your Zach Charbonnets, Tank Bigsby's, Rico Dowdle's, guys like that for this exact instance. So if one of these guys do go down, then you're not fighting the crowd that, if you don't happen to have the top waiver priority that week, or you don't have a bunch of fab to blow, then you're not rushing to do it. But Zach Charbonnet is going to be in a good situation. It's not a fantastic matchup against San Fran, but he is going to get a ton of volume like we saw in this past game. Also had 6 targets to go along with all the carries he had. So definitely going to be in line for a workhorse type of role. Keaton Mitchell, again, likely owned in competitive leagues, but I still have to bring him up on here on ESPN. He's still showing sub 35% ownership. So if he's out there, he needs to be picked up. It was a little bit disappointing. We were excited about playing him. I suggested playing him in a bunch of places, But on for in terms of something to look forward to is the fact that he played 24 snaps to Gus Edwards 25. Justice Hill only had 17. Keaton Mitchell also saw 9 opportunities, just two for Justice Hill as well. So obviously the path to Keaton Mitchell becoming like a weekly flex type play, or at least in the conversation for your starting lineup, was him overtaking Justice Hill, and that seems to be happening. Other than that, Jerick McKinnon, this is a situation where if you have someone that you can drop, maybe you're carrying two defenses that haven't played. Obviously your options are going to be a little bit more limited on Monday Night Football, but if there is someone you can drop to pick up somebody like McKinnon, that's something I always like doing, especially in these island type games. Again, kind of talking about the same thing with Zach Charbonnet. If anything were to happen, you beat the rest of your league to the punch. I do think this is a situation where McKinnon could see some increased usage as well, considering the strength of the Philly defense. So he's going to be someone to look at adding. Tyjae Spears was disappointing today. Thought we were going to see him use a little bit more, but there were only 40 offensive snaps for the Titans. So there's really not going to be much to go around for anybody whenever you're running that few of plays. Handcuff plus Roshan Johnson. We did see Deonta Foreman go down with an ankle injury in the first quarter, I believe. He did not return. So if he's out, Roshan becomes a little bit more, I guess, reliable. But it's clear that if Deonta Foreman is going to be good to go, Khalil Herbert saw the majority of the workload and the touches today, so he's going to be the clear guy. But if Foreman is out of the way, that obviously becomes a two-person backfield versus a three-man rotation. So he becomes a little bit more interesting. Jamal Williams, we've been talking about the past couple of weeks how Alvin Kamara has been seeing his touches and his snaps diminish. Jamal Williams still hasn't seen a ton of run, but if anything were to happen to Kamara, obviously that's going to boost him. Handcuffs, again, this is going to be the type of week to add these types of guys. Bigsby, Rico Dowdle, Eli Mitchell, especially. I'm really surprised at how available he is in ESPN leagues. He's someone who I would heavily consider adding, especially at this point of the year. Chase Edmonds looks like he is going to be the number 2 behind Rachaad White if anything were to happen to him. Ty Chandler, we obviously know, is going to be the guy if anything were to happen to Alexander Madison. We thought we were going to get that in this game tonight. We obviously did not, with Madison clearing concussion protocol. And then some guys for deeper leagues or, in terms of a watch list, Dearness Johnson. He did play more snaps today than Tank Bigsby. So I think this is a situation we need to monitor going forward. Although if Travis Etienne were to go down for any length of time, I think it becomes much more of a split versus, Bigsby getting the workhorse role or Dearness Johnson. But I think now that we've seen 2 weeks in a row of Dearness Johnson getting some work, he's someone who could be looked at in deeper leagues or, like I said, on a watch list for 12-team leagues. Savon Ahmed, we did see Devon Achane leave and not return with a knee injury. It doesn't sound like it's going to be anything major. It sounds like someone fell on top of him. Achane was trying to come back, and the Dolphins held him out. So if that's the case, Savon Ahmed, that's why I don't have him in terms of the ads, because it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything major. Deep leagues, you can look at him. Michael Carter obviously got picked up by the Cardinals. You can look at him there. Speaking of Michael Carter, when he got released, that led a lot of us to believe that we were going to see some more Izzy Abanikanda. We did. He only played 3 fewer snaps than Dalvin Cook. So you can look at him in deeper leagues. And then Ty Johnson, someone else we've seen involved over the past 2 games specifically. Deep league ad only, but he clearly has more juice than Latavius Murray. So if you're desperate in deeper leagues, I think Ty Johnson can make sense as a pickup.
All right, let's move over to the wide receiver position. And really, I think this is my favorite ad of the week. Now, I've been talking about this player for what seems to be every single week, but uh, Jaden Reed, I think he's the top waiver ad overall this week. I mean, unless Zach Charbonnet happens to be sitting out there. But for the most part, this is the number 1 waiver ad for me this week. Jaden Reed had another solid day. He ended up with 19 PPR points after hauling in 4 of 6 targets for 46 yards. He also added 3 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown. I think at this point, it's safe to say that Jaden Reed is the best wide receiver and their best overall playmaker at this point that's on this offense. It is absolutely criminal to me that Christian Watson is more highly owned than Jaden Reed is. Jaden Reed has been a consistent contributor to fantasy points all week or all year. he has been a guy that's been able to give you, he hasn't had a bunch of boom weeks or anything like that, but he's been a player that's given you double digit fantasy points almost every single week. He continues to flash. His upside is definitely there, and I just don't think it's going away. And now we're starting to see him get a little bit of Debo Samuel type of run of getting carries. So, and especially with Aaron Jones going down today with what could be a multi-week injury, I do think that Jaden Reed could start to see even more touches as a runner as well. So Jaden Reed is absolutely the number one guy that I want to add this week. Next up, Demario Douglas. I still don't understand why he's only rostered in 32% of leagues. He's definitely an ad as well. He gets a great matchup over the next 3 weeks against the Giants, Chargers, and Steelers. He's their only pass catcher that's really worth being on a roster at this point. Khalil Shakur, rostered in 11% of leagues. He's now scored double-digit points in 3 of their last 4 games. He has started to play a healthy role within this offense of running really a solid amount of routes to make him a viable flex option on most weeks. They will be in a heavy passing game scripts moving forward with an absolute brutal upcoming schedule against the Eagles, Chiefs, Cowboys, and Chargers. So they are definitely going to be throwing the ball, and Khalil Shakur definitely could be a beneficiary of that as being the number 3 wide receiver in this offense. A.T. Perry, I have on here. This is more of a speculative ad because we have not received really any update about Michael Thomas and his knee injury, but we did see Perry make an impact in Week 10 when he scored a touchdown and absent or in relief of Michael Thomas. Perry also flashed some serious upside during the preseason. He was kind of one of the preseason darlings, and I think he could make an impact if Michael Thomas is forced to miss this week. So A.T. Perry would be a guy, especially in deeper formats, that are definitely starving, looking for an ad. A.T. Perry is definitely that guy. Rondell Moore, 15%. It looked like it was going to be a monster day after he hauled in, on the first drive of the game, he hauled in a 48-yard touchdown. But that would be it, as he didn't see another target for the rest of the day. With the Cardinals' offense ascending, Moore deserves to be rostered in more PPR formats, but it was a little concerning considering how much they threw the ball today that he only saw that one target, especially after scoring a touchdown. So, lastly, Elijah Moore. This one I kind of went back and forth on because he has now seen 14 targets over the last 2 games. Today he held in 6 of 7 for 60 yards for 12 PPR points. With DTR at quarterback, his ceiling is capped, but he seems to be the focal point for the within this offense on underneath as kind of that underneath safety valve for them. So only 36% roster. He's more of just a PPR league only because I don't think he has hardly any touchdown upside. So I don't mind adding him. Now moving down to the stashes again, continue to talk about Michael Wilson. He did miss this week, but it doesn't seem like anything serious. Sounds like he had a little bit of a setback, on Friday, and which caused him to miss this week. But it sounds like he could be back for Week 12. So he deserves to be stashed in all 12-team leagues, especially with Hollywood Brown continually struggling. Jameson Williams, 20% rostered, starting to flash some upside, caught 2 of 3 for 44 yards and a score. I don't think he's a priority, but I want pieces of this offense and could see his role grow down the stretch. Obviously the first round pick from last year missed most of last year because of the ACL, but I do like him. Now, one really interesting option that I actually thought about putting as a must add is Rashad Bateman. He scored a touchdown on Thursday Night Football. We also saw Odell get banged up and leave that game. His injury doesn't seem to be anything too serious, but Bateman has really started to flash. He's running far more routes than Beckham. And with Andrews going down, I think it really helps Rashad Bateman inside the red zone as being a focal point inside the red zone. So Rashad Bateman, I think, could be one of the most sneaky ads this week. I really thought about putting him as a must add, and I really wouldn't. If you want to make him a focal point over guys like Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore, or even an A.T. Perry, I wouldn't mind it. I think a bigger role could be coming for him. He looks healthy for the first time in a really long time. He's flashed like that yards after the catch ability, the big play threat that we thought we were getting whenever he came out. And now that he's finally healthy, and now things could align for him to really kind of take off a little bit over the second half of the season. And so I do like Rashad Bateman. I want to mention him. Zay Jones returned today, 4 receptions on 4 targets, 20 yards, nothing flashy, but he's more of a speculative ad. But we do know he's a player that Trevor Lawrence does look to, especially inside the red zone. Last year, he was one of the top of the list of guys getting targets inside the red zone. And then after that, Trey Palmer, he continues to flash, but I think he's more of a speculative ad because he's still fighting for targets and with guys like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin ahead of him. But he did see 6 targets for only 22 yards. But he continues to make some pretty impressive plays out there. And if something were to happen to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, I think he would definitely be the biggest beneficiary of that. So 12-team leagues, you have deep benches. Trey Palmer is worth an ad. Hunter Renfro almost had double-digit fantasy points for probably the first time all year today. I don't mind at him as a speculative ad. And the rest of these guys, Greg Dortch, he did have 13 PPR points today, but I think that was more because of Michael Wilson being out, and I don't expect Michael Wilson to be out long term, so I wanted to add him on there. Other than that, Darius Slayton did have 486 and a score, but he left with an injury, so that also should be mentioned as well. So I think those are kind of the wide receivers you should be looking at.
For the Week 12 tight end streams, obviously the top of this list is going to be Isaiah Likely with Mark Andrews missing. I know there's been some mixed opinions on Isaiah Likely, but he has flashed at least a relatively high ceiling. I think the one game that a lot of people were on him, he went for 8 for 120 and a score or something like that. These other guys aren't going to be in as good of offenses and aren't going to have the upside that Isaiah Likely has. So if he's available, he's going to be the top guy. And not only that, you're obviously going to be able to just plug him into your tight end spot for the rest of the season if you've been streaming up to this point. Outside of Likely, K-Dot and Luke Musgrave, again, basically the Spider-Man meme here, pointing at each other, just in terms of guys who have been running a ton of routes, but have not really been putting up a ton of fantasy production. With Luke Musgrave, he did see 6 targets in this past game. Now he gets a matchup against Detroit in Week 12. The Lions are giving up the 11th most half PPR points per game to the position. K. Dotton, we've seen one game from him really where he's had a ceiling, but he does have a pretty safe floor, especially in full PPR leagues. Only 4 games this season with less than 8 PPR points. And he also giving up the 10th most points per game to the position. Michael Mayer saw 5 targets today. He was third in terms of the receiving production for the Raiders, went 4 for 46, gets Kansas City up next. Obviously, this is a situation where they should be playing from behind, so I think Mayer makes sense, even though the Chiefs have been one of the better teams at limiting tight end production. And if for some reason you don't get to any of those guys, I mean, you could look at Tanner Hudson. It is a thin play considering, we're talking about Jake Browning here, as well as the fact that the Bengals are running out a 3-man rotation at tight end. But Hudson has been leading the group in recent weeks, especially ran the most routes on Thursday. His production was kind of actually split between Burrow and Browning. So, that's another feather in his cap, I guess. The Steelers have been pretty good against tight ends, but they've also lost 2 of their linebackers to season-ending injuries in recent weeks. So, like I said, if for some reason those top 4 aren't available, you could look at Tanner Hudson, but not a great play.
Yeah, I think Tyler Conklin could probably be a name that you could add to that as well. Just his schedule upcoming
I
is
thought
really
about it.
good. He continually seems to be involved in the offense. Obviously, their offense was awful today, but if you look at their schedule over the next 4 weeks, it's Miami, Atlanta, Houston, and Miami again. Those are all really favorable tight end matchups to be able to have. So I just thought I'd throw him in there. I don't think he's a high priority type of ad, but if you're looking for a stream for the week, I definitely think he would be somebody you could look at. And then I do want to mention he's above the threshold you look at, but if for whatever reason Patty Fry wasn't re-added, a lot of people dropped him. I definitely think you probably could look there, but he's like 55% rostered, so he's a little higher than we normally look at. So that being said, I don't. Was there any questions in here? I didn't really. Soothing music. Thoughts on Tyreek and Smith for CD and White? I want the Tyreek side.
Tyreek side. Yep.
What was that? Would we drop Chuba or Hubbard, or is it maybe it's supposed to be for Chuba for Charbonnet? You guess what that is?
Well, if this is an either or, I think you could consider, depending on how needy you are at running back, I think you could consider it, especially now with Miles Sanders kind of back in the fold. This is a 50-50 split. It was basically right down the middle today. If this is if you need someone to drop and you're talking about dropping Chuba or Charbonnet, it would be Chuba. I definitely would not want to drop Charbonnet at this point, especially going into Thursday with the running back position being as bad as it is. Even if you aren't starting Charbonnet, I'm not dropping him and helping out someone else in my league. So if you're asking me to pick someone between the two, it's going to be Chuba.
Yeah. Cruz, Puka, or Tank rest of season. I'm gonna go Tank.
Oh my God, what is going on with Isaiah Oliver right now? This is so frustrating. I threw in a prop 3 minutes before kickoff for Hawkinson catches, and it's been the Isaiah Oliver show. Man, I wish we knew what was happening with Cooper Cup's injury.
It does sound very minor. It sounds like they said that he tried to go back into the game, but he just they held him out, and so it doesn't sound like it's anything too serious from what
If
it
it's
sounds like.
if it's nothing too serious, I would lean Tank. Tank has been an absolute baller these past couple of weeks. If it were something serious for Cooper Cup, then I would lean Puka.
Yeah, just because he'd be the only guy in town again. He'd be another guy that's saying 40 million targets a game again. So yes, I do agree with that.
So wait, are we also helping with the lineup here? Two running back, one flex, Gibbs, Pollard, A. Chan, Kyron, Puka Tank. Man,
I mean, I haven't even got into the weeds of this week of knowing if this is like a start sit question.
yeah, I can't. My brain has not.
Cruz, I don't want to just not answer, but I haven't even turned the page to week, but I will be doing so very quickly because of all the games this week and
Tomorrow.
our schedule.
Yeah.
So I'm not ready to answer that just because I don't want to give you wrong information. And then I would say come back Wednesday night and we will definitely answer whatever question you may have to set you up because we will be going live Wednesday night for start sits this week. So uh,
Are we?
I hope so.
When's the DFS shows?
Tuesday night. We're doing Tuesday night and
Okay.
Friday, and the main slate will
Okay.
probably be Friday night.
Okay. Got it. All right. Well then, yes, yes, we are.
So, all right, that makes I think that's the last question. So, anyways, hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving. Hope you get all your waiver ads, and hopefully we don't have any more injuries, especially tomorrow night. Tomorrow's night's a pretty big one with a ton of fantasy relevant players in it. So, hopefully we stay clean, and then, like I said, hope we'll see you guys very shortly because we have a lot of content jam packed in a short period of time this week. So, see you all soon. Have a good rest of the week. Have a good weekend. Hope you guys got them dubs. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.